Let me welcome all of you to our Washington News Conference today. The Senate continues to debate product liability legislation that was reported to the Senate from our Commerce Committee. We've had a number of amendments offered. Some have been adopted, some have been rejected, and it appears that we're going to continue to work on this legislation into next week. It's my expectation that we will pass a product liability bill. There will probably be additional amendments offered on Monday or even Tuesday before we get to final passage. But we are making progress in not only this area of reform, but many others here in the Senate this year. And there will be additional bills offered and reported out of other committees on the subject of civil justice reform. I'll be glad to take your questions about that or any other legislation or issues that you'd like to talk about. Let's start with Melissa Paretsky. Melissa?
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
Yes. A recent survey by Kids Count, the 1995 survey, said that 1 in 3 children in Mississippi live in poverty. And then a Tufts University study said that thousands of those Mississippi children living in poverty are undernourished. But the school lunch program being debated currently, child advocates here that we've talked to say they're very concerned that it's more, if the school lunch program is changed, that many kids that currently get school lunches will not.
Well, we're going to have a hearing in our Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee next Wednesday. I'll be chairing that committee hearing, and we will talk to the food and nutrition experts at the Department of Agriculture here in Washington to see what kind of requests for funding are being submitted in the President's budget, what reforms they recommend be considered by the Congress in this area. I'm concerned, too, as this group is that sent this information to you, that we could very definitely hurt a lot of children in their opportunity to learn if they are at school and are deprived of nutritious meals. This is a very important concern. But we do want to help improve the efficiency of a lot of these federal government programs. Try to identify ways to eliminate waste, eliminate fraud, eliminate the abuses that sometimes have crept into these programs, the way they're managed or the way the benefits are used. So we're looking for ways to economize, but we also recognize the legitimate needs that people have for a balanced diet, for good nutrition, especially young children at school. I'm a supporter of the school lunch program. I've always tried to be helpful in making sure that adequate funds are appropriated every year for the federal budget to make assistance available to states like Mississippi. And we're going to continue to do that. The questions are going to be at what level are you going to support these programs financially from Washington? How much flexibility is going to be given to local administrators? We do think more flexibility is in order, and we'll be working to try to achieve that kind of balance in these programs.
Thank you, Senator.
Now let's go to Mel Carlock in Tupelo.
Thank you, Senator. First, thank you for your help on Wednesday. Back to Yellow Creek, and Governor's point I attended yesterday, there might have been some possible contacts already made between the title and some industry interested in moving. How soon the title and that property might be built in the state?
It's my understanding that negotiations will continue between the state and NASA for a transition of that property into the hands of the state. There are going to be some funds needed, and NASA has made a commitment of $10 million, it's my understanding, to provide the state for funds that could be used to help develop that property for economic uses. What I think is so important to know is that the state is engaged in this process, and they're making progress in identifying ways to use the property to try to make sure we create jobs up there, and that the people aren't disappointed yet again with a commitment from government that turns out to be an empty promise. I was really seriously agitated by the Clinton administration's decision to go back on its word in this instance. I was very disappointed. I know a lot of people are, but we're going to make the best of it, and I congratulate the governor and Jimmy Heidel for their good work up to this point. I know it'll continue, and I'm convinced it'll pay off for us in the long run. Jeff Rand in Greenville.
Yes, good morning, Senator.
Morning.
Penny Thompson is in the Delta this morning. She's announced the first empowerment zone grant. Now, we were wondering how the new Farm Bill and the empowerment zone might be able to work together in helping keep the
I think the empowerment zone idea is a good one, and the Mississippi Delta is to be congratulated. Those counties and local officials that have participated in developing a plan to use these funds and incentives that will be made available from the federal government for new economic development activity. We need more jobs, not only in the Delta but throughout our state, and taking advantage of these kinds of new opportunities is something that's very important. In connection with agriculture, though, the Farm Bill, I think, has a separate role, and that is to try to help provide opportunities for farmers to be supported through research, funds for research, to help make farming more efficient and enlarge the opportunity for profits in agriculture. We also need to use the Farm Bill to keep the government engaged in assuring access to foreign markets. That's where the growth in agriculture is coming right now. So much of what we produce is sold in the international market, and with the new multilateral trade agreements in effect from the Uruguay round and NAFTA, we have a lot of new opportunities to increase market share, but we need the assistance, we meaning the producers of agriculture commodities, need the assistance of government to ensure that our farmers are treated fairly in the international market. Beyond that, we need a safety net to guarantee stability of prices and adequacy of supplies and some minimal level of income in spite of what may occur in terms of weather disasters or marketing problems that could occur and have occurred in the past and probably will in the future. There has to be this continued government support. It won't be as generous as it was in the past because of the pressures of the budget. But we have a lot of ways, I think, that we can work with local officials through empowerment zone opportunities and other economic development initiatives to improve the lives of the people who live in the Mississippi Delta. But that's a good example, and I'm glad to be working with the other members of our delegation to help bring that to the state of Mississippi.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Brett Austin in Biloxi.
Senator, I realize it's a state issue, but I want to get your thoughts on the return of chain gangs in Alabama.
This is something that I think is being made into a caricature by the national press. I don't see anything wrong with prisoners having to work. As a matter of fact, I think it's probably good in terms of teaching job skills, not just on chain gangs. I'm talking about in factory-type situations, whatever the other opportunities are in prisons to keep the prisoners occupied with meaningful activity. To me, this is part of a rehabilitation. You couldn't expect somebody to lead a better life or a different kind of life and pursue some career other than crime if all they do is sit around in a jail cell all the time that they are in prison. So I don't have any problem with prisoners being used as laborers or being taught job skills, being trained, so that when they get out of jail they won't come right back because all they'll know is a life of crime.
Okay, one other question.
Okay.
About the two American prisoners over in Iraq, what's the situation over there, and why haven't we heard really any movement on getting those guys back to the States?
I think we are making every effort to assure, first of all, their safety through diplomatic and other efforts that are underway. And while I am not privy to everything that is being done, I do know that there are things being done that we can't talk about on television to try to ensure their safety and try to bring this to a satisfactory result. I think it was encouraging that the wives were able to go into Baghdad and visit. This is a positive sign. We hope there will be additional positive signs in the days and weeks ahead. Dave Laval in Meridian.
Good morning, Senator. Two questions. Sir, the first part, your stand on term limits, and how do you think term limits would affect a state politically like Mississippi?
This is an issue that has gotten a lot of attention, and in our state it'll be on the ballot, as I understand it, in the general election this year. There has been a petition circulated, and enough signatures, I'm told, have been put on that petition so that it'll be an issue to be voted on. The Supreme Court has to decide first, though, in terms of members of Congress, whether states can change the qualifications without amending first the Constitution, which prescribes the limitations on senators and congressmen's terms and the qualifications for office. and that issue is still before the court and will have to be resolved. We already have limitations of terms. You know, as you know, a House member serves for 2 years and the people get to replace him. And we have more and more people retiring at earlier ages up here. So I don't know, it may be something where there does need to be debate and serious consideration given to these opportunities, but I don't know that it's going to be resolved in one election or in one Supreme Court case. And what, did you have another question? Was that your question?
No, just where you stood on term limits, and
Oh.
follow up to that question, how do you think term limits would affect a state politically like Mississippi?
Well, if our state unilaterally imposed limits on the terms of our members of Congress, and Congress operated in the future on the basis of seniority as it does now, then we would be putting our members of Congress and our senators at a very great disadvantage in comparison with those from other states who were not limited to a certain number of terms. They would accumulate all the power, and we wouldn't accumulate any. One other thing to remember is that in the past, the South has tended to re-elect members of Congress for longer terms and to have them here for longer duration, and they have gained power as a result of that additional experience. And compared with states like California, where you have over 50 congressmen, we have only 5 in Mississippi. We've been able to offset the power in those states of greater numbers by the strength of our delegation in terms of experience and power because of committee chairmanships and positions of influence in the leadership in the House and Senate. So if we want to hold our own and guarantee that our state is treated fairly in the legislative process here in Washington, we might be well advised to not approve term limits unless all states approve term limits. So that would be a caution that I would make on that subject.
And one other question, sir, in light of what happened last November at the polls, do you believe that we're seeing the end of the traditional parties such as the Republicans and the Democrats being replaced with liberals and conservatives?
It seems to me that people are less interested in party affiliation than they have been in a long time. I think they're more interested in the qualifications of individual candidates. They're more likely to vote for a candidate based on his or her ability to do the job rather than what party label they have. So people are more independent-minded, and I think that's healthy. I think it's created a more competitive political system. We're not taken for granted by either party anymore in our state. But we're not in anybody's hip pocket either. We'll support the candidate that we think will do the best job based on his or her qualifications. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that we're going to continue to see a two-party political system nationally. And we're positioned in our state to have leaders in both parties. And I think that's just fine. Well, you've all been, well, Russ Powell, wait a minute. About to leave you out, Russ. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on Dr. Foster's nomination for Surgeon General.
It'll be interesting to see what the committee does after the hearings. I think that the witness did a good job, the nominee did a good job handling all the questions from what I've heard from those who serve on that committee. But it's still not certain whether the votes are there to report the nomination to the Senate or to report it favorably. The majority leader here, Bob Dole, still sends signals that he may not call this nomination up. If he continues to feel that this is a nomination that ought to be withdrawn and that someone else could do a better job, I'm going to await the decision that's made by the committee first and then the leader about whether to call up this nomination before I get to the point of having to take a stand on the nomination. I worry about the credibility of the nominee and whether or not he would have the support of the broad breadth of the general public that he would need to do a good job as Surgeon General. I worry about that, irrespective of how the committee or the leader feel about it. So I have my serious doubts about whether we should confirm this nominee. I would prefer the president withdraw the nomination and submit another name. I think he should start over. They've made a mess of it downtown in the administration, and I think they're using Dr. Foster, unfortunately, to advance their own political agenda at the White House, and they ought to stop that. They ought to back up, start over again.